So first off, just to get things started, I gave you an idea of what I'm really interested in. Where do you see Serbia's role sort of in this geopolitical confusion that we sort of have now with an American administration that has conflicting views so far on, some of these, on trade, on European integration, on European security that we've seen for so long from NATO. It looks like at least key people in the administration sort of want to upend some of these old relationships. Then we have other guys in the administration who seem to be okay with them. They've been sending very mixed signals. And certainly it seems as though, more resurgent Russia in terms of foreign policy is trying to return to a little bit of a bigger power. I'm told they've really stepped up some of their influence and activities here. Where do you see sort of the situation with both the breakup of the former, Yugoslavia as well as the current Serbian thing?
Well, we are a small country, 7.5 million people. Now it's more than like 7 million people because the numbers are going down. Partly because young people are leaving the country, partly because not enough kids are born every year. I think we lose about 30,000 just based on that. So it's a small town that we lose every year. So as a small country, whenever you get yourself involved in big geopolitical games of big powers, you get hurt at the end. So my idea is to stay out of it and watch from the sides and basically let these things play out. And unfortunately, many politicians in my country had different ideas in the past, and the result of that, I would say, delusion of importance. Delusion of importance actually led us to some serious problems for our people. So as far as that is concerned, I mean, we've been seeing the changes, I guess, not just since the new administration. We've been seeing it in the last administration as well. A bit of a play between Russia and the United States as the EU was emerging as a potential new power in the world. First monetarily through a new currency that was becoming an important player in the markets, but then also some talks about common foreign policy, probably military. I mean, there were talks on the side of the European Union, which it seemed to us was not well received by other world powers. So what we've seen in the meantime, starting with the Greek crisis, which was a hit on euro, through that crisis in Greece, euro lost a lot of its appeal. Then we had this immigrant crisis, which really, I think, shook the whole European Union. Then Brexit happened. So I really don't have much more to say other than we are watching what's happening, and we are just trying, or we should be trying, to stay out of it and see how it all plays out.
How has outside interference affected sort of the stability of some of these, some of the states that have spun off from former Yugoslavia, or even Serbia in the case of Kosovo? We're seeing, I've been told, it seems like tensions are rising to a certain extent in Bosnia. There's certainly been incidents lately with the Kosovo itself, as well as, the last week in Macedonia. How do you see everybody's sort of agenda? And what can Serbia do to stay out of it? Because you do have to walk a careful line. You need both sides in a lot of ways, economically and from a security standpoint.
Well, I mean, I was a minister in the government of Serbia. I resigned after 4.5 months, Minister of Economy. I tried to set some things in order because we are pro market economy. I don't believe in subsidies. I believe in low taxes. I also believe, on another hand, which we don't see as a contradiction, that there should be some strong social services that the country needs to provide if we want to be a human society. So basically, I've seen the corruption firsthand, and it goes all the way up to the top of the government. After my resignation, I started a new political movement which is called Enough is Enough. I think that should sort of give you a hint of a direction in which we are going. I believe that the whole region has corrupt political elites that feed off of each other, and that conflict is basically their method of survival, because they don't have any solutions for the real problems of their citizens, including Serbia. Standard of living, good education, healthcare system, the ability to run their own business, to really, after our students, after they finish school, they get into a big nothing. I mean, there is nothing you can do to further your career. The private sector is very weak and small. The public sector is controlled by the ruling party, so you can't get into that. So the only exit for our smart kids is to leave the country, and they typically go to the West, European Union, US, Canada, and so on. So we have this situation in all countries that became or were created out of Yugoslavia. And whenever you are pressed for solutions to real problems that people have, your resort is nationalism. And they help each other in campaigns. And that's the way I view, for example, this latest genocide charge on behalf of the Bosnian government. It's a direct help to the Vučić government in Belgrade. Because if you do that during elections, that basically becomes a topic of conversation, the most important thing that people talk about, and then they all look presidential, and they all sort of make an appearance as if they are protecting national interests and God knows what. Other than that, I believe they are all weak elites that sit or have the power because of one, corruption, where they are taking public money and using it to their own purposes, both private and their party work, through complete control over the media, so that no real opposition politicians can appear and say anything against the establishment or people that are, they're running the country. And then some form of support from the Western politicians that come here, that they take pictures with them. They say, for example, Serbia is going in the right directions, reforms are underway, and in fact none of that is actually happening. So all of these things combined, people are anesthetized. I mean, they are really not participating in the political process. They believe nothing can be changed. So the state just continues. The status quo is there.
What are the Western politicians, in a lot of ways, motivation, do you think, for doing that? Is it because they're just interested in sort of a quiet security situation, and these guys will deliver it?
I believe it's stability. So, and I think we had that, there was that policy in the West going back to 70s and 60s, when dictators were okay. And it seems that sort of approach is becoming dominant today as well. Because as I talk to many of the people in the West that are, have influence on the foreign policy, including the people that are actually making it, basically they say, well, it's a young democracy. We don't know what's going to happen if this guy goes away.
Right.
Maybe some really, really bad guys are going to come after that. And there is a chance that maybe some real good democratic society will be created. Of course, with problems. Every society has its problems. But it's going to be sort of in the direction that is in the interest of the people that live there. Well, it's a bet, right? and they're not willing to take that bet because it's a small country, and if you, I mean, do that on a number of places, then I mean you maybe will get some chaotic situation. So they'd rather have a situation like it is today. There are also some corruption elements to it, because there's some money or influence being exchanged there. Some companies are getting some good contracts in various state is signing those contracts. I mean, there are kickbacks and you know, the usual political stuff, which I guess people by now got sort of used to, as if that's the only way to be a politician.
What's Russia's benefit? What does, let's say, Putin, from his perspective, get from tweaking the West and involving himself in, you know, places like even Serbia? We've seen obviously a much more dramatic version of it in Ukraine. Obviously that's a little different because it's an ethnicity thing.
And it's a much bigger country.
It's a much bigger country, but if you know, if you look up in the Baltics, I mean, those guys are terrified right now. The U.S. has basically sent troops to reassure them.
I know. Yeah.
You know, from what's his game and what's his, you know, from a Russian perspective, what's Serbia to those guys? Because it does feel as though that they've stepped up their interest in this area.
Well, I don't think it ever went down. I mean, they've been present all along, and I mean, you should look at the economic influence they have on the country. I mean, basically they run our oil industry. All the gas, natural gas, is coming from Russia through state-run companies. And I believe in those large contracts that are billions of euros every year. I mean, there's a large a big space for some personal gain for all of them, and the government is playing along. We signed really bad deals. The government signed really bad deals as far as, for example, oil industry is concerned, as we privatized it, and it was actually given, I mean, almost for free. And now we've from the Western side, because I really don't want to I mean, paint it as there's something bad coming from one side and there's all good from another side. You have economic interests. I mean, the politics and economy is about interest. It's not about love and friendship.
Of course not.
So, well, I mean, for our people, it's kind of, I mean, the political message that's been sent to our people is that we have friends and then we have these other bad guys. I mean, that's sort of the narrative. And supposedly Russians are friends, and this other group is they're trying to take something away from us. I mean, we are giving away enormous subsidies to Western companies that come here and open office, which is like 10,000 euros per job they open here, whereas the monthly salary is about 200 euros.
Wow.
So it's really not a good deal for us and very good deal for them. But that economic interest as far as the West is concerned, I'm talking about Western companies, it's not that strong. Of course, ambassadors, for example, support whoever from their country wants to do business here. Now, with Russia, we have those big state contracts, and there have been attempts from the West as well to get, for example, our power supply industry, some other industries, so to make those state contracts on that level. So there are these economic interests, but I think mostly it's just we've been a pawn in the game, and as many small nations are. And then when you have corrupt politicians who then base their survival on that to be somebody's pawn, because otherwise they can't stay in power, then you have the recipe for what's happening in the Balkans and broader.
How do you see this year? You know, the next year you're going to be in a campaign, so you're going to be quite busy, but what do you see happening, let's say, over the next 6 months here in the Balkans? There seem to be a couple of key flashpoints and a couple of key moments that are coming down, you know, the pike.
Well, it seems to us there is some geopolitical interest for this region to become more unstable, let me put it that way.
Who does that benefit, though, other than the local politicians who need conflict, as you said? And I think that's a really good observation. Externally, who benefits the most from instability? Big powers use third parties as their battleground for whatever their goals are. So I wouldn't be too presumptuous to go into what their actual goals are. I could suspect some, but I'm really not going to go into detail about it, because it's really not something that's of interest to us. It's just to, get our country out of the main battleground for whatever is happening there. It's obvious that there are different interests between the European Union, Russia and the United States as major powers, and the EU is an emerging power. How it's going to play out, and what's the position of Germany, for example, and France, and the whole influence of Brexit. We are just watching what's happening, and I'm trying to see that our positions are such that we are really not a piece in that particular game. So what we are trying to do is talk to people and explain this to them. And it's sometimes difficult, because emotions are high. If you look at, for example, the headlines of our newspapers just in the last year, but you can go all the way back, 2, 3, 5 years. There are certain messages that are sent to Serbian people. There's praise of Putin and Russia, and there is sort of vilifying the West. And it's even going out in papers that are partly owned by the West, which is puzzling, to say the least. So, and I have this, conversation with voters where they tell me that, the West is not our friend because they bombed us. And yes, I do think it was a wrong thing to do. And let's not go into details of that. It's but on another hand, that Russia is our friend. And one of the arguments is that they are helping us protect or keep Kosovo within Serbia, and the West wants to take Kosovo out of Serbia. And then I tell them, well, you've certainly heard Putin say that the West is hypocritical, has different solutions for different parts of the world depending on what their interests are. And then Putin says, we need one solution that then applies, a principle that applies to everything, to Crimea as well as Kosovo. So then I asked them, what do you think that one principle is when he says that we need one principle? Does he think that Crimea should go back to Ukraine and Kosovo to Serbia? Or does he mean the other principle, where Crimea would stay with Russia and the Kosovo would be separate with Serbia? Because both of these regions are trying to separate from internationally independent states. So, in Kosovo we have that UN resolution that's still sort of some no man's land in between. After you put it to people that way, then they start thinking and understanding basically that they are no friends, they are just interests, and job of your politicians is to keep the country out of those turmoils and run some responsible policies that are going to benefit the people, and not play big roles in geopolitical games, because it's really not something that a smart political leader should ever do. A little humility in terms of role in the world always goes a very long way. As somebody who's covered America and the Middle East for 15 years, I sort of learned that the hard way from my country. Okay, so in terms of it's interesting. Twice you referred to the EU as an emerging power. Do you still see them as emerging?
I see it as
a bad year.
I see it as an emerging power under attack. I don't mean a military attack, but all other forms of attack. And what's going to happen, I really don't know. Now, euro is under significant pressure. Some of the problems are structural, some of the problems are just the perception problems, you know, how perception is important in business and
particularly in currency.
In currency, yes. So that's one, and then the talk about creating their own military is also raising eyebrows everywhere. So as we've seen, you know, I've participated in a number of sort of open tables where they talked about the future of Europe, and there were sort of three different scenarios emerging that I could recognize from hearing it from people that would explain it. One is a sort of German version, which is calling for strong union, with a strong central bank, with one currency, with common foreign policy, with a strong military that's backing up that's then a new world power. I mean, it's a market of over 400 million people. I mean, it's huge. Yeah. Then there is a Brexiteers version of the European Union that says it's a loose union. It's basically a common market in which there are no supranational, or there is no laws that apply to everybody. Every nation makes their own laws and make contracts with each other, I mean, to suit their needs. And of course, no common currency, no central bank, no military, no foreign policy.
Even visa-free travel seems to be a concern right now.
Yes. So those are two ends of the spectrum, and we've seen argued by many Americans on various forms that the American interest is somewhere in between, and that the US would always wanted one telephone number that they could call in Brussels to be able to make an agreement that would apply to everybody. However, on another hand, it seems that they are not very keen on the euro as a common currency, because it is, if it becomes ever strong, would be a sort of a competition to dollar. And then, of course, no military. NATO is enough to you know, sort all of these out.
Because we're seeing more question on the U.S. support for the NATO military alliance than I've ever seen in my lifetime.
Now, this was before the change of the administration.
Right.
So now we have some, as you mentioned, some new ideas coming to the table, and
we don't know what they are yet.
Well, you don't know, and I mean, I can just follow what's happening as I do, other than the, you know, Stephen Colbert and and other comedians. I mean, there are some serious things that are happening in the world. So whether it seems like the US focus is moving elsewhere, and it's no longer Europe, and it has been for a number of years a focus of you know, keeping stability in the world. Now there were some significant changes. EU was starting to emerge as a I mean, strong player in the world, and sort of unifying slowly. And since I would say it's somewhere 2008-9, I mean, as the second Barack Obama term in office, we've seen that sort of that friendly, supportive role went into more of what's happening there? Are we getting a new power in play? This is how it looks, seeing it from outside, and trying to read between the lines, and sometimes not even between the lines of local American analysts that would appear in you know, some open tables and forums in Europe and elsewhere.
Yeah, I've just, in the short time that I've been reporting from Brussels, you know, I've been shocked by how disorientating it's been for some analysts who've said, you know, I've just spent the last 50 years expecting that America's our best friend in the entire world. They kind of almost came up with this idea, you know, through it, in some ways it's an extension of NATO.
Yes, it is.
You know, and suddenly they feel like, politically, are they even our allies at this stage? You know, one diplomat in Brussels told me it's very hard to consider somebody your friend if they're trying to destroy you. You know, from a European Union perspective, and that's not a German perspective, not a Belgian, but an EU perspective. They wonder, is the President of the United States out to destroy them?
Well, I've been choosing my words very carefully, so I'm going to leave that one unanswered. I mean, it is up to them.
Putin would like to see them weakened at the very least. Well, he said so.
It seems like it. I mean, just the fact. I mean, I like to always take a step back, and emergence of a new superpower. It doesn't seem to be, to me, that it would be in the interest of everybody who are superpower today. Emergence of a new major world currency, it doesn't seem to be it would be in the best interest of people that are trying to protect their current position. Now, whether that's true or not true, and what they are going or willing to do about it, that's a different issue. For us, it's important to try to understand what's happening, so that we can again try to find a place for us somewhere in the shades of.
I wish you the best of luck. Thank you so much for taking the time. I know it's a very busy day for you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir.